All right, it's time for Game 3 from Bobby Fischer's My 60 Memorable Games. Game 3 is Petrosian versus Fischer, 1958, in Portoroge. I think Bobby was 15 years old, and Petrosian, I think, was about 28. You notice here that Lucas Chess has added a new feature. If you want to review the game sequentially, you can. Or if you want Lucas Chess to show you games randomly, you can now do that. They just added this feature, and it's an interesting feature. I like it a lot. Okay, Bobby played black. I'll be playing both the white and black pieces. So let's go ahead and see if I can remember all the moves from Petrosian versus Fischer. Bobby, of course, is playing a King's Indian defense. And now we get these moves, which are, pretty much expected. Bobby here plays d6, and Petrosian castles, and now Bobby plays his knight to c6. Petrosian plays d3. Now this is going to be interesting. We'll see what happens. Bobby plays his knight to h5. Petrosian now plays d4. Why did Petrosian do that? If he wanted to play d4, why didn't he just play d2, d4 immediately? Did he change his mind when he saw Bobby play knight h5? I don't know. But Petrosian was known for making multiple moves when one move would have sufficed. I think it's part of his cat and mouse type of playing, his style. It's very defensive on the one hand, and it's also psychological. He's trying to throw his opponent off. Well, we'll see how Bobby handles this. And now Bobby plays f5. E takes f, g takes f. And here Petrosian notices that this knight is unprotected. So knight takes e5. Bobby says, well, I can do the same. Should Bobby take with the bishop, or should he have taken with the pawn? It's debatable. Petrosian kicks the bishop back. Well, Petrosian goes ahead and wants to develop the rest of his pieces. And it looks like there's going to be some argument over this h8a1 diagonal. Does Bobby want to trade bishops? Not immediately. Over the next few moves, Bobby is going to rearrange his pieces, and he's going to put his rook on this e file. So let's watch. Petrosian will put his rook on the e file for as long as possible. Again, why did Bobby put his rook on f7? Because he wants to move his queen over to f8. And now, finally, Bobby can put his rook on e8. Well, Petrosian is quite happy to get at least a pair of the rooks off the board. And also bishops. Petrosian now brings the queen into the battle. It would be very easy to overlook this a7 pawn, but it's also being attacked by the queen. Bobby defends the a7 pawn. And here Petrosian brings his rook to the semi-open h file. Bobby plays a5. In the notes, Bobby says this is his first move of freedom. I guess he felt like all of his moves were being dictated by Petrosian. If we look at this position, we notice that the f5 pawn of Fischer's is isolated. This will become the subject of the next several moves, and really for most of the game. So Petrosian wants to begin to attack it. Bobby will defend it. Not that way, though. With the queen. Now the knight comes up, and Bobby brings the rook over. It's here that Petrosian really just wants to wait, I think, would be It's the way I think about it. He plays a pawn move as if to say to Fischer, what do you want to do? Fischer brings his queen up to g7. Petrosian says, I'll be happy to take queens off the board. And then another pawn move, a3, as if to say to Fischer, what do you want to do now? Bobby plays his rook back to f1. Well, there's only one attacker on this isolated pawn, so it is Petrosian's plan to begin to add attackers. He first moves his bishop. Of course, Fischer sees this and adds another defender. And now the bishop comes to d3. There are 2 attackers and 3 defenders. Bobby plays a waiting move. Here, Petrosian plays his rook onto h5. 3 attackers, 3 defenders. But now Fischer does something pretty interesting. He sets a little trap. Bishop to e8, removing a defender. Well, should Petrosian take the pawn? If you work through the sequence, you will see that no matter how white tries to take the pawn, he will end up losing the exchange. Of course, Petrosian sees all of that. Now here, Petrosian moves his rook to h2. Bobby puts the bishop back on d7, and then Petrosian moves his rook to h1. Another one of these times when he moves one piece multiple times. The only thing I can imagine is that he wanted to give Fischer the move in this position, the same position, which occurred just a couple of moves back. Okay, he's saying to Bobby, what do you want to do? Fischer puts his rook on h8. Now, Petrosian has a plan of improving his knight. So he's going to move the knight first to c2. And I think Fischer begins to adopt the strategy of Petrosian a little bit. Moving the king to f6, now comes up the knight. This knight on d4 is an improved piece. It is now not only attacking the f5 pawn, but also reaching into Black's territory and attacking e6 and c6. Here, Fischer just brings his king back. Well, that's an interesting sequence of moves. So, Petrosian moves his bishop now back to e2. And here, Fischer makes a move which he calls a mistake. Fischer says that he went into a panic over this move of Petrosian. Well, that's exactly Petrosian's strategy. But this knight g8, Fischer, in fact, gives it a question mark. Chess engines today indicate that it's not a bad move at all. Notice, however, that this rook on h8 has now been blocked in. This gives Petrosian the idea of opening the A file, so he plays his pawn to b4. Up comes the knight. The bishop comes over attacking. Bobby resolves matters over here with the pawns and then moves his king up to g6. Immediately, Petrosian seizes the A file. Fischer will now give a check, give another check, and bring his knight back. And here, true to Petrosian's style, first he attacks on the a6 square, and now he moves to the a7 square. It almost looks like a mouse slip. Here, now, Bobby says in his notes, Petrosian surprised him by pushing his pawn. Doesn't this just lose a pawn for Petrosian? Well, yes, it does, but he'll end up getting it back. This knight on f3 is coming to e5. Fischer relocates the king. And Petrosian's hoping that Bobby will take with the king, but that would be a catastrophe. Bobby would like to take the d5 pawn. The rook is attacking the pawn on f4. The king comes up to defend. Bobby gives check. And now, well, there's nothing to be done for this h6 pawn. It's a goner. So Fischer goes for the d5 pawn. Well, it looks like it's a wide open file, so Fischer pushes. Petrosian puts the rook back on h1. Fischer notes that later Petrosian will write an article for a Russian chess bulletin, and he will say that if he played rook to h7, it would be much stronger and likely winning. Chess engines today indicate that that's not true. Rook to h1 is the strongest move. Bobby pushes. And now comes Petrosian pushing his pawn onto f5. This is getting a bit too close for comfort, so Fischer puts his rook over here on g8. The king is coming up to support. And now there's nothing to be done for the white rook. It has to take the pawn. And it's simply a pawn race at this point. Here, Fischer offers a draw, and he makes a note that it was actually a breach of etiquette for him to offer the draw. It was Petrosian's game, and he should have been allowed to have offered the draw. But this position is drawn. It will turn into a king and queen versus king and pawn, with the pawn, a bishop's pawn, on c2, and this is a well-known draw. Well, that's Petrosian versus Fischer, 1958. I hope you got something out of that, and I hope you enjoyed it. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it, and please subscribe. We'll see you again soon. Bye.